Moving on to page 4, a page that does not require me to do math, so hopefully I can sound a little more intelligent on this one. You'll notice at the top there is yet again a space for the address, so make sure you fill that in. Now, this is a very important section in regards to inspections because this is your get out if you don't like your inspection section or accept the property in as is condition section. So option 10B1 is no matter what the inspection may reveal, the buyer is buying the house unless they failed to disclose an obvious and known material defect to the property. So an obvious material defect that should have reasonably be known is if you've got somebody that's lived in their house, let's say, as their primary residence for the last 10 years, and they say the basement has never leaked in the last 10 years we've been in this house. And then you get there to view the home, and your inspector notices there is a flood line on the drywall where there is mold and dirt and mud due to flooding. That would be an instance of where it is very obvious that these people should have known that there is a defect. I have only used this clause if I am working with a savvy investor that is most likely going to completely gut and renovate the house and doesn't care what kind of condition it's in right now. So if you are working with any sort of average home buyer, this is not going to be the paragraph you would like to select. So we're going to pretend like, well, we're not going to pretend. In our example that we're working with, we're going to go with the most common section when it comes to inspections, which is paragraph 10B2. You have the right to decide how quickly or not quickly you want to do inspections. If you're in a multiple offer situation, it might be in your best interest to eliminate a long period of waiting for inspections. So 7 days might be a good timeline. And that's where having the relationships with our inspector vendors is good because we can work on making sure we get those done. We've got partners that can accommodate that schedule. A normal time is about 10 days. If I'm writing an offer on a property out in Meade County or anywhere outside of basically Louisville Metro, I might do 14 because I'm not sure how many inspectors are out there, how quick they operate, what their turnaround time is like, how available they are, things like that. So if I'm out in the boonies, I might do a little bit longer. I would say on average 10 is a good number to work off of. So within these 10 days, the buyer will do one of 3 things. They will either accept the property in as-is condition, so say, yep, everything looks great, we're moving forward. Or they will terminate the contract because everything sucks and they want out. Or they will do what is most common, which is ask for the seller to make some repairs based on the result of their inspection. So assuming that we are going to ask for repairs, it is crucial that within this 10-day period, you do any inspections that you want done for your buyer, or your buyer does any inspections that they want done. So I would recommend, as often as possible, get your home inspection done within like the first 4 days. And then if there's something that comes up on there that needs further evaluation, like the furnace needs further evaluation, the roof, whatever, the foundation, you still have time within your 10 days to get additional professionals out there to look at those items that are of concern. And most sellers are going to be willing to work with you on that because they would rather have an informed decision on how you're going to proceed rather than just guessing. So if it's day 5 and you can't get a foundation guy out there till 6 days later, asking for a 1 or 2 day extension is not unreasonable if it means that the deal is going to keep moving forward potentially. So just be very aware of your timelines. Be very aware that it is our job as the buyer's agents to help guide our buyers to make decisions with how many professionals they want to bring in. So that way they're making a very, very informed decision. So in this example, in 10 days, we've had all the inspectors out. We're satisfied with the reports that we have, and we're not mad enough to back out. However, we don't love it enough to accept it as is, and we're going to make a repair request. So this first blank here, a typical number to fill in is within 3 days. So what we're asking right now is say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we still like your home. However, it's not quite as perfect as we thought. So we want you to fix these 5 things, for instance. So we're going to give them 3 days to respond to our repair request. And what that time frame does is allow them to have their plumber or their electrician or whoever come out and maybe give them some quotes and decide, can we afford to do this? What on this list can we take care of ourselves maybe? So it gives them a chance to make an informed response back to us. Now, if they come back to the buyers and say, hey, we're willing to fix 2 of these 5 things, we now have 3 days to respond to their repair request. So if we need to get additional information, if we need to have some monetary consideration, whatever, we now have 3 days to respond to that. And parties can negotiate this for as long as we need to with this 3-day, 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 3-day timeline. Neither party can send over a termination as a response to a counteroffer unless the party issues a last, best, and final offer, which I like to give a shortened response when that happens to 1 day. So let's say in our example, we say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we want you to fix these 5 things. They say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're willing to fix these 2 things. But we say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's really important that these 4 things get done. We can live without this 1. And they say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're willing to give you 1 more. We'll give you these 3 things. Now, say the buyer's tired of all this at this point, and they say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is our last, best, and final offer. We want these 4 things fixed, or we're out. And they have 1 day to respond to either accept as we have written, or a termination is then sent at that point. So last, best, and final is an all or nothing. So we couldn't have sent our termination if the sellers are not willing to fix 1, 2, 3, and 4 without that last, best, and final language. So that's important to know that during this negotiation period, a response to a negotiation can't be out of the blue a termination. It's important to notice also too that when you're negotiating these repairs that the seller agrees to make sure they're done in a workmanlike manner and done prior to closing. So they're not going to just put, duct tape on a leak or something like that. Moving on to this survey paragraph. Buyers will have the right to do a survey if they want. However, it is up to you to decide if they want to make it contingent upon a survey. So much like an appraisal with a cash offer, you want to give some time since surveyors are less common than appraisers and their schedules are also busy. So I think 21 days is a reasonable time for that as well. So just again, don't force yourself to perform on a term you can't perform on by giving yourself a really tight deadline there. So moving on to closing time frame. When possible, like in our example, we aren't contingent upon the sale of a home and we're working with a lender that we know. I prefer to pick a specific closing date. So at the time of this video, it is August the 15th. So perhaps, September 20th would be a reasonable time to close. I know that the lender I'm working with has the ability to close that quickly. I know I don't need to sell a property, so it would be very easy for me to make that timeline work. However, if you're working with an unfamiliar lender, or perhaps you have a situation where it's contingent upon you selling a home and you can't give a specific deadline, a common deadline is 30 to 45 days. Okay? As a buyer agent, I always prefer, actually we're going to go back a step. If you receive an offer as a seller with this 30 to 45 day range, make sure you are very, very clear with your seller client on what that means. So today is August the 15th. Day 1 would be August the 16th. So that means the earliest closing date is September the 16th. So they would need to be prepared to move out and be completely out of the house as early as September the 16th. So make sure they are planning for that, because they might see 30 days or they might see 45 days. The buyer might see 30 days, and there's a whole big disagreement on when you're actually closing. And if you can't agree upon a closing time frame, it automatically defaults to the last day of the contract, which could potentially cause rate lock issues for the buyer if they're not working with a great lender. So just prepare your seller to be ready to close as early as day 1 that is possible to close. So possession time, if I'm representing the buyer, I always want to try and get keys at closing. It just makes it a little bit cleaner. However, sometimes it might be in a multiple offer situation, and a way to beat somebody might be to give the sellers a couple extra days to move out. So we'll say by 5 p.m., 2 days after closing. So now the seller has 2 days to move out prior to closing and turn over keys then, in which there's a delayed possession form that you wouldn't want to fill out for that as well, which would spell out exactly when keys are being turned over, what happens if the seller is not out in time, and just protects all the parties involved. Condition at possession, the house needs to be broom clean, which is a very, very, very loose term. Especially the more houses you show, the more you realize that people's standards of clean varies greatly. However, the biggest thing you want to look for is making sure that trash is gone, debris is not left in the backyard, there's no new damage in the home based or from when they moved out, like holes in the drywall and things like that. That all their personal property is gone, and that the repairs that you asked for are completed. And to make sure all of that, here at line 212, you have the right to do a walkthrough before closing, just to make sure everything is in the condition it should be. And if you're doing delayed possession, you have the right to do another one again before possession time. Most buyers, and especially in our example here, are buying a home to live in, so you're going to make sure that there's no leases in place. However, if you are buying a property that has a tenant there, you would select box B to make sure all the leases transfer to you or your buyer as the new owner, which would include security deposits and any proration of rent for the month that you close.